Drugs or women, brand new shoes, but the devil lives in St.
Hey, this is Ken Tizzard. I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, and I write songs and I play music. These days, my family and I live in Ontario, and I just recently finished writing a record which I've been calling No Dark, No Light. This record focuses on balance, the tension of life, a place in the middle where two lives, two homes, and opposing personalities share one story. Each song tells its own story, and together they work to paint a larger picture. I'll be using my website to bring my friends and fans into the experience of recording this record. I'm hoping through participation and communication, I'm going to give you all a sense of ownership in this experience. It's a new approach for me, and I hope you enjoy the process. Let's start at the beginning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself for the majority of you who don't know anything about me. I've been playing music for the better part of 25 years, as far as all my life really. I started playing music when I was 13 years old, playing in some punk rock bands back in St. John's, Newfoundland with buddies of mine. After a few years of doing this, I moved to Toronto to pursue a career in music. I played with a bunch of Queen Street bands over the years, playing 5 nights a week, doing what I could, trying to get noticed. After playing the scene for a while and working day jobs and doing whatever I could to get by, Jake Gold saw me performing one morning on Breakfast TV, and he connected me with a band from Winnipeg called The Watchmen. I wasn't really ready to move to Winnipeg at the time, so I stayed in Toronto as I was just settling in. For the better part of 15 years, The Watchmen toured around Canada, the States, Europe, Australia. We had an awesome time. We made records, we got radio play, television appearances. We were pretty much living the dream, and this went on for a good chunk of time. There was a period at the end of The Watchmen where I was writing songs and I didn't really have a place to put them. I got together with Danny from The Watchmen and we arranged a bunch of material and started a project called Audio Playground High and Wide. This was kind of a downbeat electronica project. It was a great opportunity for me to branch out from the songwriting I've been doing with The Watchmen and get away from familiar strategies that I've been developing. At the end of The Watchmen, I started working with Ian Thornley from Big Wreck. We decided to start a new band, which became Thornley. Once again, I headed out on the road playing rock and roll, getting to tour with huge rock bands like Nickelback and Three Doors Down. This went on for a few years and a couple records until differences of opinion and my own sort of feelings of being a father kicked in, and I kind of retired from the road on a temporary basis anyways. Midway through my touring career, my wife and I had our first child. When the second one arrived, being out 10 months of the year just became too much. I found it harder and harder to be away from my kids. Being on stage with a career that had been constantly moving forward suddenly just didn't seem like the right fit. Even on the road, with a big rock and roll band, I was always the guy who kind of stayed in the back lounge listening to Bob Dylan and Nick Drake while everybody was partying it up. More and more I was being drawn into this music that had a different vibe, a more acoustic quality, songs that had stories to them, and it was something I'd always been into, but I was really feeling the need to do some more of this myself. My first official solo record was recorded in the winter following my departure from Thornley. It was a simple record called Quiet Story House. It's a collection of songs that I've been dabbling with. I used 6-string solo bass as the primary instrument, which was a pretty strange thing to do, but it allowed me to tour solo and put a record out. Now Magazine gave it a 1-star review, and the journalist wrote the review and summed it up with the phrase, "Dude can't sing." And that was basically the exposure I got on that record. Touring around Canada doing a one-man solo 6-string bass show was a tough gig, but it did, it had its benefits. It got the attention of Brian Finley at West Bannon. And he put me on stage with a 28-piece orchestra made up of the Toronto Symphony and Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. And he did some arrangements of my piece, and we performed it with the orchestra. And that was an unbelievably fantastic experience. After Quiet Story House, and while I was touring Quiet Story House, I wrote a record called Lost in Awe. This was my first acoustic guitar solo record. When I was touring with Quiet Story House, I bought a trailer and I'd take my wife and kids out and I'd do shows on the way to pay for gas, and it was a really interesting and unique way to tour, and it opened my eyes to doing things differently. So I put out Lost in Awe. I toured again. We did more of these camper things, wife and kids, still doing 100 shows a year and having a good time selling CDs. When I came back to Campbellford at the end of the Lost and Awe tour, I started working with Ken Layton and Dave Mowat on a new trio which became the Variety Show Players. We played around for a year or so, doing random backyard barbecues, pub shows. We had a really good time, and we made a record called Between the Lines, which was another great recording experience. When the Variety Show Players decided to call it quits, Ken Grant and Dave Fisher sort of came into my life, and at the time I was dabbling with the pedal steel, and it had sort of become a bit of an obsession for me. And when it became time to do a record, I decided that pedal steel was going to be the main instrument on the record instead of guitars. So we went into Blue Rodeo Studio with John Wynott and made this pedal steel rock and roll experience, which is a record called The Goodness of Bad Intent. Yet again, another really positive and fun time with these guys, and I got to experiment with, some new sounds once more. And that kind of brings me up to where we are now. The last year I've been writing again with the acoustic guitar, and now I'm here, a Newfoundlander living in Ontario, wife, kids, mortgage, second mortgage, car, all that stuff. And all this experience behind me, and I'm in an industry that's totally changed, and I'm looking to do something new once again. I've got these 12 songs, which I'm going to put on a record called No Dark, No Light. I'm going to record it down at Brent Bodrug's studio called Sli-Fi Chapel, and with your help, I'll be able to make this record sound as good as I hear it in my head. The goal is to raise $8,000, which will cover the costs of fulfilling CD obligations to supporters. That'll be the manufacturing of the CD and that stuff. If we surpass this number and hit the second number of 12,000, that'll give me some money to hire a publicist and do some marketing on the record, which would help as well. With your help, I think this can be a really great experience. I started working on No Dark, No Light, and it took me to some really deep places last year. I visited back home to Newfoundland, saw old friends, enemies. I visited the grave of my mom and some other friends and family that have passed. And this going back and seeing things and seeing the changes that had happened got me thinking about things and seeing everything in a different way. I also went on tour with Ron Hines in the fall of 2013 and the winter of 2014, and he really turned me on to a new way of expanding my songwriting through character and story development. And watching him on stage with large crowds, hundreds of people with just a guitar and his voice and some stories, and having these people totally engaged, seeing this happen night after night lit a fire under me in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And this also sparked a lot of the writing on No Dark, No Light. The process was extremely long, it was extremely exhausting. It was one of the longest periods of time that I've ever spent writing a record. And I think the result is great. There's some videos for you to check out. I've been doing those online. And I think with your help, I'm going to make a fantastic record that we can all be proud of. And I want to keep you guys in the loop every step of the way. The rest of the info is right here on KenTizzard.com. Have a look around and enjoy yourself.
Down Water Street, the storefronts changed a few blocks north. Who'd ever blame to fight against this hurt and change?